In the Qur'an 23:14, Allah says, "Then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of that clot we made a fetus lump. Then we made out of that lump bones and clothed the bones with flesh. Then we developed."
ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين.
Now, at a quick glance, you might be thinking Muhammad, a desert nomad, knew the scientific process of embryology 1400 years ago, but nope, he was wrong, and I'll explain why. Number 1. For starters, a clot of congealed blood cannot transform into sperm. Its dead tissue, hardened blood, or blood in general, cannot make a fetus. This description is likely influenced by an unscientific and primitive understanding of human reproduction, based on observations from an early-term miscarriage and a woman's menstrual cycle. Number 2. In other translations, it says, "We made this sperm drop into a clinging clot." But again, that doesn't make any sense. The embryo is not attached to the uterine wall, since the musculoskeletal system begins to develop around the 5th week. The alaqa, or clinging substance, cannot be a suspended or hanging thing, because the early embryo is floating in amniotic fluid, and is attached via a connecting stalk to the uterine wall, in which it's buried.
And those bands are the remnants of those segments. So this is what I believe to be the leech-like appearance of the human embryo. And I believe in my descriptions in my book, I talk about it having a leech-like appearance. The similarity between the embryo and a leech is amazing. The embryo is attached to the wall of the chorion. The embryo is attached to the wall of the chorion. The embryo is attached to the wall of the chorion. The embryo is attached to the wall of the chorion, chorionic sac, which is attached by chorionic villi to the endometrium or lining of the uterus. And so the human embryo is attached to the lining of the uterus, just like a leech will attach to your skin. I don't know whether you have leeches here or not, but we have certain lakes in Canada. If you go in swimming, these leeches will attach to your skin and suck the blood. So the analogy there is quite amazing. Initially, the embryo acquires a primitive circulatory and nervous system during this early stage. Thus, the term alaka refers to the leech-like external appearance of the embryo, as well as to its clinging relationship to the uterus, and is an appropriately descriptive term for this stage.
Number 3. Nowhere in the Quran does it mention the ovum or female egg.
You're finished. You're finished. You're finished. You're finished. Wallahi, you're finished. Wallahi, you're finished.
It's impossible to be born from the sperm cell alone. The sperm drop does not become the zygote. A fertilized egg does. Skipping out on the egg and saying that it's only the sperm that the embryo forms from is incorrect. The Quran fails to mention the important role of the female egg, that plays in the reproduction of humankind. It implies that reproduction is caused simply by the male semen. The human ovum is very small, though visible to the human eye, and its purpose wasn't understood until the 18th and 19th century.
ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا.
Moreover, the translation of the word nutfat should be semen and not a sperm drop, since there was no in-depth knowledge of spermology in Muhammad's days. Number 4. The steps of bone formation, then clothing with flesh, is also wrong, even assuming that itham means both bone and cartilage. You have a differentiation of mesoderm, and within the mesoderm you have segregation into things like embryonic mesenchyme, and then you have these cartilaginous centers that will form bone, and these are forming simultaneously with each other.
Which we call myoblasts or early muscle cells are present adjacent to the developing bones. Differentiation into skeletal muscle attachments appears after the ossification process in the shaft and the ends of the bones. I was asked many times, did the bones appear before the muscles? Well, they certainly do. If you want to be logical about it, you wouldn't have muscles until you had something to attach them to. So you have bones and then the muscles. And this is clearly stated in the Qur'an that the bones appear first. A major developmental landmark during the 8th week is the
Verse 14 is scientifically incorrect and full of illogical steps for human embryology. The Quran basically stole teachings from Greek embryology.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Specifically from the Greek philosopher and scientist Aristotle, who did extensive study of animals through dissection. He lived 950 years before Muhammad in Greece, and wrote a whole book on animal embryological development, saying the exact same thing the Quran says.
The first scientific studies in embryology, as far as we know, were done by the Greek scientists in the 5th century BC. Hippocrates, who we know as the father of medicine, and after whom the Hippocratic Oath is named, was one of the first to write books on embryology. And later Aristotle, another famous Greek philosopher and scientist, studied chick embryos, actually opened eggs and was able to study the development. Concluded at that time, and this is 4th and 5th century BC, that man's development, that is human development, was similar to that of the chicken. The writings of Aristotle and Galen, another scientist, dominate the early part of our historical record, and from the time of Galen, around 200 AD, until the 16th century, no major advances in our knowledge of embryology were recorded in the literature of Western science. This is mainly because these kind of studies were forbidden in those very dark ages. Consequently, as far as we know, until the revelations in the Qur'an, man was relatively ignorant about his reproduction and development. It was not until the invention of the microscope in the 17th century that any significantly new information was added to the field of embryology. Before this time, the fetus was said to develop from a coagulum of human blood and the seed. There's really no idea of how we developed, but in the days of Aristotle, they believed, as Sheikh Mustafa Ahmed said, that menstrual blood was the thought to give rise to the embryo, and that they really didn't know anything about spermatozoa or sperms. But when the microscope was discovered, if we could have that first slide. Now, these early microscopes were very primitive by our standards today. This first slide, I don't know whether they're going to, can you see those? Well, that's a picture of Aristotle there, one of the earliest writers in human embryology. Maybe with the microscope we could come on. Yeah, this is the microscope that was invented by Leeuwenhoek in 1694. And this is a very crude microscope. As you can see, the object, whatever it was you were looking at, was put on the end of a needle point, and there was a small magnifying glass, and you would look at this, but it didn't give very much magnification. It'd be equivalent to what you would get now if you used a magnifying glass. So it wouldn't give very much enlargement. So this is the state of knowledge in the 17th century, and it would not be possible for them to see the early stages of human development even at that time.
His work was very widespread and studied from all the corners of the world. According to Surah 23, verses 12 to 14, the fetus develops into bones, which are later clothed in flesh.